it in the little ball.
From Eat to Perform, I am currently being lectured by April Blackford on getting silicone spray. Writing that down, silicone spray. So if you hear my squeaky chair, that is what you're hearing. And hopefully next week you will not hear because I will have silicone spray. April, did you want to say hi to everyone?
Hi, everyone.
So if you're listening to this on a podcast, awesome. You're one of the 4 people doing that currently. And we also do these on YouTube. I'm sort of joking. We actually do these mostly for members because members were saying that they like to be able to watch and listen to the webinars, but a lot of times they aren't able to go to YouTube. And so we were like, well, why don't we just publish these to, various podcast directories, iTunes, SoundCloud, things of that nature. And so we have a few episodes up. Hopefully people are enjoying those. What we talk about every single week is, and then I'm showing off my new fancy glasses for April. But what we talk about is that we're sitting here, myself and April, with a panel of Eat to Perform members. And what we typically talk about a theme, but sometimes we'll take a few questions here and there. We found that the theme tends to go a little bit better. Let's see, somebody's asking a question. I want to make sure. Okay, so I'm getting compliments on my glasses so far. So just in case you are only watching iTunes or listening to iTunes, basically I kind of have like a Buddy Holly look going on. But these are reading glasses. These are not my actual glasses. So people are like, oh my goodness, he's not wearing his glasses. And like, I don't actually have glasses. I just wear reading glasses when I'm reading the computer or doing coaches calls during the day. So that's actually one of the things that April's actually the leader of the pack of our group coaching program. And I think we have 5 teams right now, certainly 4 teams and kind of a 5th mobile team that we take. It's sort of like a premium level of Eat to Perform where we, kind of work with clients a little bit more in depth, kind of a good accountability type tool. So that's kind of a fun thing. So we're actually these webinars and go-to meetings and stuff like this. We do these most days, and it's kind of becoming second nature to talk into a camera. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about was working through injury and working when you're sick, and then also plan Bing your workout. And so I'm going to start with plan Bing your workout. Is there anything, April, that you wanted to bring up before we sort of get rolling?
No, I think we're headed in the right direction.
Okay, so let's start with plan Bing your workout, because I think one of the things that happens for people is they sort of get tied up in this mentality, and to a certain extent, I think what the real problem is that whether you're looking at it like this or not, there is an element of earn your food to working out, right? Especially before Eat to Perform, because we sort of walk people through why that approach isn't the best approach, and that's why I'm kind of talking about this topic right now. And so I'll give an example that I used this weekend. When I do my long endurance day, I typically do them on Fridays, but I actually have a backup plan, and the backup plan is to do it on Saturday. And people go, well, why would you have a backup plan? Well, there's a lot of factors that can go on that, you don't consider. And, for a lot of people, real life happens. And so if your kid, calls home sick and you plan to leave at 2 o'clock, you're screwed. Last week it was raining. We had sort of planned to go to a movie with my daughter and I. We weren't able to get out the door till 1:30, 1:35. And by the time we got home, it was 4 o'clock, and it's been getting dark here around 6 to 6:30. Well, the plan was to run 18 miles. And so, 18 miles is not going to take me 2 hours, and then I'd be running in the dark. And, one of the things that's shocking, by the way, when you start running, and especially if you're running on sidewalks and stuff like this, is how often you have to avoid cars. I mean, it is unreal how often cars hit you or try to hit you, because people aren't paying any attention at all to anything. And I do wear headphones, so people could say, well, if you didn't have headphones, you'd be better off. I mean, I can point to 3 or 4 situations where headphones didn't make a difference at all. And, a lot of times people are just looking at their phone, not paying attention, and then they almost hit you. Charlie Nagel's saying, by the way, congratulations on your deadlift medal, Charlie. But she was saying try biking in New York. And, yeah, I mean, doing anything in New York seems crazy to me.
I started even walking.
Yeah, I mean, when we were walking around in New York, you have to have your head on a swivel the whole time. So what I did was I decided, well, okay, I'll just go ahead and do this on Saturday. Now, I will say one of the things that is sort of important to this discussion is that you should really try to do it on Friday, right? And really kind of find ways to talk yourself into making sure that you're keeping your commitment on Friday, because, if it becomes easy to talk yourself out of Friday and then just do it on Saturday, it's going to eventually become real easy for you to talk yourself out of doing it on Saturday too, right? And so the nice thing was that when Saturday happened, I was pretty serious about it, because it's a part of a commitment in my life. And I think that having those types of commitments with some level of flexibility, I think, is fairly important. What are your thoughts on do you have any strategies that you do? I mean, you're pretty rigid, right? I mean,
I'm fairly, but I've had to readjust my whole, routine and let go of a little bit of the rigidness since my house has been on the market. Obviously, I went through one agent and then fired them and have a new one now, but it's literally you have to drop everything at the last minute, or, rearrange plans. You're dressed ready to work out and then someone calls, you got to put it off. And, so I've actually had to learn to make adjustments, or, not be quite as rigid. So
do you ever do any workouts at your house?
I've tried. I actually am very well equipped to train at home, but I have a hard time staying motivated in a garage. It's either too hot in the summer, too cold in the winter, and it seems like I'm much, much weaker, and I don't push myself as much in the garage. So, no.
Yeah, you're trying to show off for all the bros at the gym.
Right.
No, it's funny because I'm looking at my hip thruster, the Brett Contreras machine, right there, and I think I've only used it 3 times, and
you better get on that.
Well, I'm trying to, but I'm more motivated to go to the gym or to run than I am to work out in my basement. I do have a squat rack in my garage. I have a deadlift platform in my garage. Like you were saying, living in Minnesota, sometimes it'll get a little cold. But I think that one of the, I want to head back to the thought process of, really don't try to push things off, because if you push things off, what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up pushing it off on that second day too, and then you're in a bad routine. So really try to stick with your routine. It's a commitment to keep health a priority, right? And so doing that, I think, is a big thing. And when you look at all the priorities in your life, sticking to a routine is certainly going to be one of those. The other thing is when I do my long endurance type day, as an example, and really a lot of my workouts are like this, I don't go in with specifics in mind. I go in with general ideas in mind. And so my thought process was I was going to run 18 miles. My backup plan was to row a marathon, and I didn't do either of those things. And what I did is on Saturday, or actually Friday night, I started talking to my wife because, I did, and actually it's in iTunes right now, but I did a podcast with for the coaches course with Doug Chapman, who is Julie Foucher's coach, China Cho, really like just CrossFit royalty, right? And so Doug was talking about, he has his athletes ruck, and it's really beautiful here in Minnesota right now. And so I thought to myself, well, that sounds like an interesting thing to try. Now it was sort of funny. 5 minutes in, so basically, if you aren't familiar, ruck is, I don't really truthfully know. I mean, I got a little better idea. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But the basic idea is that you're hiking. Sometimes, like when you are testing in the armed forces, there is typically a time limit and a distance limit. And so, I think I saw something like 18 miles in 4.5 hours, which I have to say, if you're doing 18 miles in 4.5 hours, and then the second part is you have a weighted pack on, which is 45 pounds, man, I'm going to tell you, you're moving, and because we were really just kind of hiking with a weighted pack. We ended up, it was right at 4 hours. We ended up doing 10 miles, but just so you know, it was pretty funny. What's interesting is I've had a few conversations with people, and they're like, oh yeah, I've totally walked with a weighted pack before. And I'm like, 45 pounds? Like, really? Because 45 pounds is pretty heavy, I don't think the good majority of people are walking with 45 pounds. We did actually see a guy doing what looked like a real ruck, where he was kind of, he didn't look like he was jogging, but he was moving at a pretty brisk pace. And he had a gigantic pack, and absolutely, I believe his pack had 45 pounds in it. But I don't think the good majority of people, if you throw a sleeping bag in there, something like that, it's still not 45 pounds. 45 pounds within 5 minutes. Seriously, my traps were lit up. I mean, they were like feeling it right from the beginning. And I thought to myself, we just better turn back, because I do a fair amount of long endurance, but my wife doesn't. And so I was thinking to myself, she's going to really struggle if I'm struggling right off the bat. But then I thought, well, maybe my, traps will, lighten up a bit. I don't know that they did necessarily, but what we did is we took opportunities where every 30 minutes we would take the pack off for like a minute or two, and then kind of get rolling. And then on every hour we would kind of have some food strategically. One of the things that I've been trying to do, I talked a little bit about it with my long endurance last week, was adding more food into the equation and feeling better as a result. I felt great. My wife was like a trooper. I mean, her HRV on both days. She actually, one of the problems that I'm having right now is after my long endurance day, I have trouble sleeping. And it could be some combination of more food, but I think it's just like pain, you know. And so, like, I can be a light sleeper at times, and so if I'm in a little bit of pain, it sort of wakes me up. But what was interesting about it is that I think I took like a little nap, the very next day, which was a Sunday. But I wasn't really like super tired. My HRV was pretty good. I think it was like 84 and it was green. But I mean, I felt like my whole body felt it, And actually, what I've started to see is that my HRV is sort of delayed. And for those that don't know, I'm talking about heart rate variability. All of our group coaching clients just got their HRV monitoring finger kits. And so basically you put it's like a EKG that you put on your finger, and it measures the variability of your heart rate and also measures your resting heart rate. And so this morning my resting heart rate was pretty good, but my body was still kind of, I felt good, honestly. I think I probably could have worked out. Like if I didn't have this is normally a rest day. Normally it goes Friday's long endurance. Saturday is a rest day, but I kind of, we'll do some hiking, walking type stuff. And then Sunday is a workout. So I switched it up where Sunday was a rest day. Monday's normally a rest day. So I'll have 2 days back to back. And I'm expecting that, I'll feel pretty good going into tomorrow's workout. You don't really do a lot of long endurance, but are there any issues with sleep that you'll see with some workouts and such?
No, I actually, some people generally like can't train later in the day because they actually get kind of ramped up after exercise. I am one of those that, I am one of those that it doesn't matter what time I work out, 10 o'clock at night, noon, I need a nap. I sleep fine. I sleep. It actually helps me sleep, just because you just feel tired and just worked in general. I was going to tell you, you must be trying to give me some ideas for my hiking trip this weekend. I guess I need to put, like a 45 plate in my backpack.
Vicky did 30 pounds.
So 30, you did 30 pounds. So 30 pounds and maybe about 10 pounds worth of snacks. So
I'm just telling you, like, don't do it. Cause
wow. I love brutal workouts. And see, the rucking would totally be up my alley. The running, trying to dodge cars, no, definitely not.
Did you, you're talking about going 30 miles?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you, you'll be calling me from the emergency room.
I'm gonna have to do it, and I'm gonna do a video journal of it.
Oh, it would be awesome. It would be. I'm just gonna tell you, like, you really don't know until you know, and I'm just telling you, it's hard,
Generally, you see around here, because I live in a military town, there's a lot of guys who, that's like a traditional. They have to ruck like every week, and I think their packs are generally, are around 50 pounds that they have to carry for miles at a time. I think they generally will do a couple of short rucks during the week and then the long one on the weekends. So during the week, it'll usually be like 3 to 5 miles, and then the weekend would be a longer.
Well, I felt like it really highlighted to me that, I still have, one of the nice things about testing your fitness in various ways is that you get to figure out where your weaknesses are. And so I don't think my weaknesses are in my traps. I think my weaknesses are in my shoulders. And so the fact that, my shoulders could be a little bit stronger is what was highlighting, the trap issues. And so we did find out ways, to kind of relieve. Like I said, we stopped. We weren't super diligent about, pace and things of that nature. But I will say, it might be my go-to thing at some point, because I did like it a lot more than running, and we live in or near a park that is sort of the size of Central Park, in New York, but it's all woods and hills and stuff like that. And so it's a real good place for it. But probably more important than any of that is not what I like, but what Vicky likes, and she really liked it. She thought it was a good workout. I think what a lot of people, I know we'll get back to sort of plan being your workout. But the idea here is that, one, I was supposed to work on Friday. Two, I was supposed to run or do a row, and then I ended up doing a ruck, right? So being flexible is sometimes fun, right? Because we thought to ourselves, that would be a good thing. In terms of HRV, what I'm seeing fairly consistently, actually, is that sleep is probably a bigger factor than just about anything. And, just judging strictly on heart rate variability and the ability for people to recover, we always talk about sleep being a big deal. I'm getting some indications that sleep's a bigger deal than food, and so I think that that's interesting, which is also interesting because when you talk to people, right, often they will say, I'm sleeping a lot better now that I'm eating an adequate amount of food for what I do. And so, it ends up kind of working on itself in layers, which I think is sort of.
I actually agree that sleep is it's as important, if not more important, than the food. I know for me, I generally keep a pretty strict schedule in regards to sleep. And if there are days which I haven't gotten my HRV yet, but if there are days where if I'm short on sleep, like I normally average 7.5, and if I get 5 hours and I have to get up, my husband usually gets up around 5 in the morning, and I'm the good wife and wake up, with them and go ahead and start working, even though we're both so tired, we normally don't even talk to each other. But if I'm short on sleep, my heart is actually racing whenever I wake up, so it's not like you're waking up calm, relaxed, and recovered. Your body's stressed because it hasn't gotten enough sleep.
Maybe if you brought in that Celtic spoon, he would want to communicate with you more in the morning.
I start stirring his coffee with the spoon.
Yeah, this morning I actually had, I don't know if you've seen in the meal planning group, but people were talking about those AeroPresses. And so I was out of coffee, and we were using the AeroPress when we were in Grand Marais, which worked out really good. I mean, I could not recommend that thing more. But I was out of coffee at home, so I ended up doing it. We didn't actually have a tea kettle, and so I was able to warm up the water a little bit more. Holy cow, that was awesome. I might actually do that more mornings just because it was that good. So
I need to break mine back out, because I actually had ordered one of those years ago, back when we were in the original Facebook group together, because you loved yours. The little.
No, it's different than that. It's like a press. What somebody in the meal planning, I know what you're talking about, because what I used to do is, it was like a Cuban, well, I think it was actually an Italian espresso maker, but they're very popular in Miami to make Cubanos and cafe con leches. So I think the Cubano is basically like espresso with sugar in it, and then the con leche is espresso with milk. But both are really, really good. I mean, like, just thinking of whether or not I'm gonna go to Miami, that is one of the things that sort of calls to me. But I think when we're talking about working out, oftentimes if you have a plan and you have something that's similar, right? My goal was 4 hours. And Fitbit doesn't like rucking, by the way. So, if I had done 4 hours worth of running, as an example, I would have burned 2,800 calories. I think I ended up burning like 1,700 calories or something like that. So it's not registering the weight. Your heart rate doesn't, my heart rate really didn't spike up very much. I'm sure sometimes when I went up hills and things like that, it was. But I think really sort of the point being is that when you get a chance to do something fun rather than just work out, don't ignore that. View that as an opportunity. I remember recently, it was a workout day, and my daughter asked me if we could go rock climbing. And so instead of going to do my regular weight set, I ended up, going rock climbing and had a blast. Just loved the heck out of it. And so I think for a lot of people, they sort of want to get into this routine and keep to the routine. But if you're doing something active, it's not like you didn't work out, right? So in the case of the ruck, even though it might not have been 18 miles worth of running, it was certainly hard, exposed some weaknesses. And what it really did more than anything was show me that, I could have another thing. We're getting to the point where it's almost wintertime, so there'll be some opportunities for cross-country skiing. I'm not very good at that. But like anything, you want to get good at something, keep at it. The other thing is we have snowshoes. And so snowshoeing, the problem that you run into with some of these things when you're kind of doing long distance, you got to be really careful of overheating and sweating and wearing too many layers and stuff like that. And so, sometimes, that can become a factor. It's easier, obviously, to control the conditions when you're running on a track or, rowing in a gym or something like that. So, I would encourage people to embrace kind of different type workouts. Once again, even if you looked at, like I said, a typical CrossFit workout, even weightlifting, 300 to 500 calories, 18 miles would have been 2,500 calories. That's 5 days worth of working out. Even if you discounted a little bit of what the Fitbit's saying, it's still 3.5 days worth of working out because I was able to do that much time. And, if I can convince my wife, it's always easier to adhere to something when you have more people counting on you doing it. So if, I'll honestly tell you, if my wife says, she wants to make this a habit, this is the new habit. I would drop running in a heartbeat because then two of us are doing it. And so it might be kind of a fun thing, here in the Twin Cities to have a meetup and have everybody do it, because I thought it was a pretty good time. I mean, it would be nice to, once I've got a few weeks under my belt and try and get a little pace going, that might be interesting as well. Any thoughts before we move on to the next topic?
I just want to say that that's a very smart decision. If Vicki wants to make it a habit, then it needs to be done. Because a happy wife is a happy life.
Well, I think that,
But it also gives y'all the quality time together, which is, you can't get that, running
there,
along.
like the first 3 hours was quality time. Let me just tell you about that last 15 minutes though, because here's what happened. So I'm a big believer in this, and actually it'll be a good segue into the next thing. I'm not a big believer in making artificial goals for no reason, right? And so one of the things that Vicky doesn't know that I know is that you're more susceptible to being hurt when you have less food and you're at the end of what you're doing, right? And so it got to a point where we were pretty close to 10 miles and right at 4 hours. And she was like, well, we were supposed to eat. She's like, well, we were supposed to eat or put down our pack. I can't remember because it was like 3.5 hours. So I think it was just put down our pack and grab a little something. She's like, well, why don't we just keep going? I was like, well, because that's not the plan. The plan is, to take off the pack. We've been doing great with that. She's like, yeah, I know, but, we can get to 10 miles in under 4 hours. I'm like, who gives a shit? You know what I'm saying? Like, who cares if we get there at 4 hours and 15 minutes? It wouldn't make that big of a difference. But she talked me into it. I ended up doing it, but truthfully, I didn't like doing it that way. And I probably would drag my heels a little bit more because what's the value in getting hurt? What's the value in not doing the plan as you intended it? Because part of it was supposed to be fun, and truthfully, it's not fun to me when we stray too far from what the plan is, because I feel like you're more susceptible to getting hurt and not enjoying yourself near as much. So that's something to think about as you're doing it. But in general, I will say, I felt it in weird places. Like my patella tendon was a little sore, right at the top of my hips, was a little sore and inflamed, like just places that you wouldn't think. I mean, I would have never, if you gave me like the 10 things that were going to hurt, I would have never, like my traps would have never made the top 10, but having another thing that you can both enjoy, and especially from a long endurance, it's kind of hard to find long endurance stuff. You know what I mean? That you can, because I go for a 4-hour hike, even longer hike, but I mean, that's not a challenge, I mean, it's just, to me, that's just like burning calories, to do a 4-hour hike with 45 pounds on your back, your body's got to adjust to that. And so if I could do that more often and then maybe go from 10 miles to 12 miles in a 4-hour period and stuff like that, I think, my shoulders would respond to that favorably. I think that in general, my body would be better off. And so, it's not that I won't go hiking. I mean, we like to hike. It's something that we enjoy doing, but this was kind of different. And so when I look at my long endurance, I look at it from a challenging standpoint. Now, you guys might be different, right? And so if you're new to all these things, I mean, April thinks that she can just strap on 30 pounds and go 30 miles. I'm just saying it's going to be harder than you think, So moving on from there, let's talk a little bit about injury. And once again, we'll we brought it up in the podcast with Doug Chapman because he talked about CrossFit Games athletes and CrossFit Games athletes getting hurt. And, obviously we're a big fan of eating an adequate amount for what you do. And Doug was saying that, he always gets concerned about his athletes not eating enough and being more susceptible to injury as a result. And he had, Julie Fouché was one of the athletes that works underneath Doug. I went and visited those guys in February. Julie was super sweet gal, very nice to my daughter. Was just really, really nice to Mike and I. But I did say at the time to both her and Doug that, just from the looks of what she was eating, there were some additions that could be made. What role, food played in her recovery and things of that nature, you really don't know. But I do think that a lot of these CrossFit Games athletes, and we even see it with Danny occasionally, where it seems like, I mean, when you're working out a lot, sometimes you don't always feel like eating, right? And so you've got to be very conscious about planning that type of stuff. And oftentimes, I think that, these athletes mentally, they're just so much stronger than regular folks mentally, and that will bring you farther than a lot of people think. But if you had that mental capability and also had food, you'd be more susceptible to not only get better, but you wouldn't get injured as a result, right? Once again, I'm not saying, Julie got hurt because, who knows, what I am saying, though, is that if you're eating an adequate amount of food, you're less susceptible to that kind of thing. And I think that happens in some small way for all of us, right? Where whether it's sleep, whether it's food, whatever it is, you become more susceptible to being injured or sick when your routines aren't good, when your sleep patterns aren't good, when your food isn't an adequate, amount. I think that to a certain extent, quality of food does matter there. I think that, sometimes you can kind of get into a little bit of a rut. That said, if you gave me the option and you said, this person can't eat the best choices, should they eat less or choose bad choices for a few days? I would probably say eat an adequate amount of food that isn't super optimal, and just try and find opportunities to have a salad, have more starches, things of that nature. What are your thoughts on that discussion, April?
I absolutely agree that obviously if you're in a situation where, where you don't have very many food options, rather than avoiding food, eating what you can to get an adequate amount. I do also highly agree with the quality of food on the prior topic. That when someone trains a lot, getting a good amount of quality food is very important, just for the micronutrients, I think, are, really good. Also, whenever you're sick, I think that, the micronutrients help a lot as well.
The thing about micronutrients that I don't think a lot of people factor in is that micronutrients are much, for instance, if we're talking to someone about performance-focused fat loss phase, right, and we're putting someone through 8 weeks, one of the largest arguments for mostly whole foods in that scenario is obviously that, it fills you up. You can kind of get away with fewer calories, but, you're going to need to have those foods for micronutrients. When you're eating, let's say, 2,200 calories, as opposed to, say, eating 2,700, 2,800 calories, micronutrients isn't as big of a concern because you will get more micronutrients just from volume of food. And so that's something to think about when you're talking about, when you're talking about, going through a period where you're trying to maintain, you're trying to thrive, you're trying to get better at working out and things of that nature. if you're normally working out 2,800, but you have a longer day and your calories are 3,500, so you end up eating more for that day. And maybe you were only able to get in a salad and the fries were cooked in oil and all the things that people worry about. It's really not that big of a deal when you have used up those nutrients through exercise. So that's something to think about in terms of micronutrients. But in general, I think, micronutrients, from salads, from protein, all these different things. Because usually when you're, especially if you're eating stuff with fat's going to have a lot of vitamins in it, because that's essentially where, a lot of this stuff is going to be stored for the animal. And so you'll end up, and then, in terms of absorption to your body, fat plays a pretty important role. And so, one of the things that I like to do is I like to have a strategy earlier in the day where I'm getting in a good amount of micronutrients. If I don't have, like, say, a salad at lunchtime, I'll always have a salad, even if I'm having a starch. A lot of times we'll often advise people to have their starches away from their fiber just because of uptake. I don't always concern myself with that. I guess the best way to say that is I prioritize micronutrients over uptake of glucose, right? So I'd rather get vitamins in than lose a little bit of optimization related to, uptake of glucose into your muscle or whatever. In general, your body sort of figures out this stuff no matter what when you're eating an adequate amount of food. Now, when we talk about eating an inadequate amount of food, this is one of the arguments that we always make for having an adequate amount of calories most of the time, is that your body is more easily able to figure it out. If you're constantly asking your body to do difficult things, it's going to ultimately kind of have this down regulation effect. Hormonally, it's not going to be super positive. So if you're only doing it occasionally, no big deal. Like, as an example, today, my calories aren't super high. It's a rest day, ate pretty freely this weekend. I did want to talk about that for a couple minutes at some point. But any thoughts on what I'm talking about there, April?
I agree with you. I actually was going to say that I agree about the having the majority of your vegetables with your fats earlier on in the day, because your micronutrients are going to be better absorbed with the fats. The vitamins will be better absorbed. So it's actually kind of very smart.
Yeah, like I said, I don't always do it. I will prioritize vitamins over. Shoot, what was I going to talk about? Can you help me? What was I talking about right before this?
You were talking about you ate fairly freely over the weekend, so today you didn't eat as much.
Yes. Okay. So what I wanted to talk about there, because I'm just going to bring it up and then we'll talk about being sick, and then we'll just shut it down after that. I do a lot of the marketing with two other people for Eat to Perform. Almost all of our marketing to get new clients happens on Sunday and Monday. And what's interesting about that discussion is that people don't often think about what we think about naturally. And when you think about it, people, if you look at the days that people don't really buy Eat to Perform all that actively, there are Thursdays, Fridays, and to a certain extent, Saturdays. Okay? Why is that? Well, because they're not consciously thinking about their food intake, and in fact, they're probably just enjoying themselves on Fridays and Saturdays. Then what happens? People go Sundays and Mondays, gotta get things in shape. Hey, I've been hearing about this Eat to Perform. Sounds like a good thing. Boom, they sign up. Okay, so most of our marketing dollars are spent on Sunday and Mondays. You go, well, why is he telling me this? I don't need to know this marketing information. Well, it's also the day that people freak out on slot the most, right? On Sundays and Mondays, and you always hear it. And it, the last couple of weeks I've been thinking about talking about it, and for some reason I just haven't. But just because you bought Eat to Perform doesn't mean that you're not going to still want to eat more flexibly on the weekends, right? And that what we often see is that people are still struggling with that. What I always hope that we have an effect on people is not to give them ways to navigate it, which we do a little bit, right? But to understand that that's the way life is, And so if you're not, part of the idea with Eat to Perform is that the good majority of the time you're eating a good amount of calories, you're doing awesome stuff, right? You're eating an adequate amount of food, so then you can go for hikes and things of this nature. And I think a lot of people look at it, kind of the opposite of the way that we look at it. When I think of eating, I think, oh, if I have a little bit more food on a Friday night, then my hike on Saturday is going to be better, right? And so a lot of people don't think like that because they kind of view food from a punishment standpoint or restriction standpoint. So one of the things that we really try to impress upon people with Eat to Perform is, since you're supposed to be eating normal the good majority of the time, don't trip out about Fridays and Saturdays. Yet people still trip out about Fridays and Saturdays. And I feel like, one, you have to decide, what's your priority. And we would make a strong argument for activity. I mean, when you look at people having progress, seeing results, what I hope you hear from April and I on a weekly basis is that work matters greatly. And so when you go, well, scales up, feeling a little fluffy or whatever, right? And it's Sunday and Monday, tell me what work you did, right? And so, because like one of the things that happens for me, especially on my long endurance days, is you get sort of depleted, right? And even after you have food, it's not like, you go to bed like shredded. And oftentimes, like even going into the second day, my body is still sort of adjusting to, kind of the beat down that it just took, right? And so, but usually on Monday morning, or Sunday morning, depending on when I did it, that's when I'll look my leanest, right? And, but, make no mistake about it, I mean, the good majority of the time, I'm eating an adequate amount of food. I'm eating fairly freely on weekends. So if I feel, like, not as tight as I might normally be, or, maybe my abs aren't showing up like they normally would, I know why, right? I think the key is, can you allow yourself to enjoy life, right? And then realize that, okay, I can buckle down. Like I said, today on Monday, I knew, I ate pretty freely this weekend, and thought to myself, well, we'll just make sure we kind of get, eating relatively normal on Monday, not using like, I'm going to intermittent fast for 24 hours or do some other like really super extreme thing, because, you had a hamburger on Sunday night. I mean, I'll just go ahead and tell you. So on Friday night, my wife and I go to this pizza place fairly often. Okay, did not eat an extreme amount of food on Friday, so the amount of food that I ended up eating on Friday night actually just kind of evened out for what I probably should have eaten for Friday. So it wasn't like one of these days where I was kind of over the amount of food that I should have eaten. On Saturday, as an example, we did the long ruck or whatever, and we ended up going out to have Mexican. Normally, Saturdays is not a big going out night for us. We wouldn't necessarily have a lot of food, lot of calories. We did that night partly because of the amount of work that we did. And then Sunday we were with family, and then my brother, asked what we were going to do for dinner, and I was like, well, let's just do Chipotle because I know I can do Chipotle in a fairly responsible way. He goes, well, why don't we just have hamburgers instead? And I did almost think to be a party pooper, and I was like, no, that sounds awesome. Let's do it, And so it was a little bit out of my normal routine, and I got to be honest with you guys, I'm kind of a routine guy. I like to be able to, if for instance the night before, we ate a little bit out of the box, had a little bit more calories. On Sunday was a rest day. Certainly wouldn't be a day that I would normally have, a lot of calories. But at the same time, some level of flexibility happened. And so today, I haven't eaten an extreme amount of food. Before the webinars, I always have a steak. I have, a salad. Sometimes I'll have mashed potatoes. We didn't have mashed potatoes, so I didn't really worry about it. And then, after this, I'll, have some kind of dessert, typically, some kind of cereal with protein or something like that.
I think our weekends were identical. But the funny thing is that, like, for me, Friday, I ate a whole pizza, like the whole thing. Of course, it's gluten and dairy free, so they're a little bit smaller. They kind of jip you on those, but it's about like a 10-inch pizza. I ate a pizza, and then Saturday I ate a whole lot of ribs, and Sunday I ate Moe's, and and my husband picked up this jelly bean game for my son that you spin the wheel and it goes to a color, and you either get, it's like a mystery where you either get juicy pear or booger flavor, or you get there was one that was
you filled up on booger flavored jelly beans. Is that what you're telling me?
I got moldy cheese, and I got moldy cheese, and I got skunk pea, and there was something else. But anyway, so basically spending time with my family, same thing. I was, fluffy today, probably because I consume more fats than I normally do. But, rather than me and you freaking out, oh my God, my abs aren't as defined today as they normally are, I went and did a crap load of squats today. You put it to good use, rather than, freaking out and stressing over 1 or 2 days. And like what you were talking about, in regards to the Sunday and Mondays are the freak out days, I think it kind of boils down to some people trying to keep a rigid routine. And then when they go off of it, they tend to think that they just ruined everything. But also, kind of like the people that go on vacation, they never weigh themselves. They hate the scale, but they'll go on vacation to an all-inclusive resort for 9 days. And then as soon as they come home, they want to get on the freaking scale the day they come back. But they have to take themselves in a month.
Hoping for the best when all the evidence was to the contrary.
Yes. And I always ask, why the hell do not weigh yourself the day you come back from vacation, especially when, number one, when you don't weigh yourself regularly, but like me and you, if you're fluffy, I'm not going to get on the scale for a couple of days. I'm going to wait until Tuesday, Wednesday, till I feel normal again,
I don't need that bullshit like weighing on me. But I have to say, like, can I ask you a question? Do you exercise when you vacation typically?
It just generally depends. Like this week, I'm going to my in-laws, and I will go to the gym. Tom has a conference in DC. I will go to the gym there. I try to, but I don't. I don't remain extremely rigid about it, like on my normal schedule. I do improvise, but I do try to get activity in.
Yeah, I'm pretty rigid about it. Like if it's Friday and I'm on vacation, I'm still going to do 16 miles. I will say that in the last 6 months, where I've been doing more long endurance type stuff, as my work ability has increased, my body composition changes have been much more extreme. Like even since the Granite Games, my body is different. I mean, and what's the good and bad of it is that it hurts like holy hell to do this stuff. I don't think that, I mean, even adding the food, the food has definitely helped. And that's only been a couple weeks, but as I've started to go longer, I realized that I needed to have a little bit more intra-workout nutrition. So that's helping for sure. But the amount of work and the amount of muscle, I don't know. I've been really trying to stay away from the body fat stuff because I have a body fat machine in my house. I try to stay away from it when the mirror is telling me a really good story. Like, why do I need to know what that is? I mean, my lats look bigger, my traps look bigger, my arms look bigger, my abs have more definition. So why do I need to know any of this other information? It's just going to, mess with my overall progress level. I mean, the other night I ended up doing legless rope climb. And normally when I do legless rope climbs, I can do like 3 or 4, have to space them out, kind of get a little tired. 100%. I mean, just dead on. I was doing 175 on bench press, 5 times 5. I have kind of a bad shoulder. I don't tend to use that as an excuse, but to be able to do 175, 5 times 5 pretty easily, that's telling me that I'm probably over 200 now on my bench press, which has sort of kind of been this, I've been able to do 200 before, but it wasn't always pretty. And so I'm really trying to kind of progress into those levels. But it's funny. I wouldn't say that the running is making me stronger. What I would say is the resting is making me stronger. And what I mean by that is in the past, I've tried to, get in more volume in theory to get stronger. And what I'm finding is that the running tends to allow for the rest of my fast twitch muscle and things of this nature and just better recovery in general. The last thing that we'll talk about, and we won't spend a lot of time with it because we're already past an hour, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about was if you're sick, like should you work out when you're sick? And it sort of relates to all the things that we've been talking about this whole time, is you're not earning your food, right? The whole idea is to show up at the gym at 100% and you'll get better. I actually think that that's what I was just describing just now, right? Because I am, working different parts of my body at different times and therefore allowing for some level of healing and recovery, that I end up being better. Same thing with working out when you're sick. The last thing you want to do is go to the gym when you're sick and get everybody else sick. So if you can, one, like we're saying, eating an adequate amount of food is probably one of the big problems that a lot of people are facing when they're sick all the time. If you're not getting an adequate amount of rest, that's going to be a big thing. One of the things that I find, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about this. My guess is we'll probably agree because I always see you waking up earlier than I am. But I believe that waking up at the same time each day is one of the biggest gifts that you can give your body. I'm not saying that you wouldn't sleep if you could, but I'm saying that if some days you wake up at 6:30, some days you wake up at 9, some days you wake up at 11, and then some days you wake up at 4, that ain't helping. What are your thoughts on that?
Your body has an eternal clock, and having it on a set routine and schedule is absolutely good. And when you, like what you said, when you get up at different random times, I think that's why a lot of times like night shift workers, that have all the various because like my mom, she's been a nurse for 20 some years, and she's always worked night shift. And what she tries to do is, she'll sleep a little bit during the day, not enough sleep, and then get up and go to work. But then when she comes home, if she's off the next day, she wants to hang out with my stepfather. So she basically tries to go back to a normal life. So a normal non-night shift worker, and they generally will tend to have higher cortisol levels and things like that. I absolutely agree with you. I actually get up, I'm usually 5 o'clock, 5:15 every day during the week. On the weekends, I still will wake up at 5:30 to use the restroom. Like I get up and I might lay in bed till 6, but I still get up same time even on the weekends.
Yeah, it's sort of difficult for me to explain this to my teenage daughter, but she struggles with these kinds of things for the reasons that I'm talking about. Is that she undersleeps sometimes, then she oversleeps sometimes, and obviously that's like a big thing in the teenage world. But when we are able to keep her sleep fairly consistent, she's got a better demeanor and things of that nature. So I think that you always want to check, are you eating an adequate amount? Are you sleeping? Are you waking up at the same time? If you are not feeling 100%, there's no reason why you can't get in a longer walk rather than go to the gym trying to lift weights, substandard. Now, one of the things I will say, my wife's a big believer of this, sometimes you need to sweat it out. I do think there is something to that. I think that, when you're feeling, if you're feeling like 80 to 85%, that going to the gym, getting good sweat on can be kind of the thing that sort of helps you get to the next level. And so sometimes just sitting on the couch and watching TV isn't going to be the big thing. I mean, one of the things that, I've talked about a number of times when I first started doing CrossFit, one of the things that really struck me was when people would show up after, kind of getting injured, and then they'd show up 4 days later and they'd just be working around the injury. I think the problem with being off of the horse for too long is that it becomes difficult to get back on the horse. And so you got to find ways to sort of stay where activity is still a priority in your life. But the goal of exercise is to get better at exercise. It's not to earn food. It's not to, it's kind of interesting because I do have a lot of family members. I have talked them into getting a Fitbit so they're more conscious of movement. But the problem is I can't talk them out of earning their food. And so, given the two choices, I'd rather them be more conscious of activity and knowing that on the days that they're eating more that they should be a little bit more active. But at the same note, I really think that when you change your intake just from that standpoint of kind of that mental thing where you're eating to perform better at exercise, it's kind of a mental shift that makes a really big difference for people. I know it certainly does for me. And then when you can do that, and then some days, like I said, if you have a day where, let's say, you weren't really tracking all that much, but you know, you only burned 2,300, but you ate 2,800 calories, you know, that doesn't mean that you can't give more effort in the gym, you know, the next day or two. You know, I know after this last weekend of having a good amount of food and then allowing some good recovery from the stimulus. I mean, once again, I don't want to go too much longer here, but you know, one of the things that I don't think that a lot of people account for, when I first started CrossFitting, I wasn't very strong, and I started lifting weights, and I was eating a good amount of calories. You know, I was able to eat, you know, over 3,000 calories all the way down to 162 pounds. When I went to CrossFit, I started having to eat 3,500 to 4,000 calories just to keep up. What happened? Well, was I doing that much more? No, but my body was adapting to the stimulus. And so therefore I needed more food. Eventually though, my body did adapt to the stimulus and I didn't need 3,500 to 4,000 calories. And I would say right now, on most days, I eat somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,600 to 3,000 calories a day, right? And so keep that in mind, that if you're new to exercise, you might actually need more calories than you think. I know that for a lot of people, if you're coming from an undereating background, all of this stuff is sort of scary. But the harder it is the things that you do, the more you're changing your routine, you might require a little bit more food to adapt to that. And if you don't, you won't progress and you won't get better at exercise. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is reduce your levels of adipose tissue or your fat and then increase your lean body mass. Well, that isn't always easy to do, especially for somebody that's been training for a while. And so trying to make sure that you're getting in an adequate amount of work, that you're actually allowing for a certain amount of stress that your body has to adapt to so you can then get better. So keep those things in mind as we go. Last thing I'm going to say before we shut this down, I know I've said that a few times here. One of the biggest gifts that I was able to give myself was I figured out that I controlled the switch. And what I mean by that is I controlled the switch on how much I weighed. I controlled the switch on how much water was in my body and, you know, what I ate and things of this nature. And staying weight stable, I think, is something that is mentally freeing for people. Now, I'll say, if you're a woman, okay, you gotta allow for a 3 to 4 pound fluctuation one way or the other, because that's just the way that evolution made that happen, right?
It is.
you got a sucky deal there, but as long as you're in that, you know, window, you're fine. And I think that, you know, everybody kind of thinking from that standpoint of they control the switch, I think that is sort of liberating for people. So my dog is tired of me, and that's who you're hearing howling in the background. So rather than picking up the dog howling in the background, we'll go ahead and shut this down. But I hope everybody appreciated this one. We tried to cover a lot of ground, and I appreciate everybody staying here throughout it. So talk to you later. April, do you want to say hi or bye?
Good night, everybody.
All right, talk to you guys later. Man, she got really super whiny. Oh shoot, I stopped the other one, but I didn't stop the